Hello!
Ahoy!
Welcome to another very special bonus episode of Bottom of the Stream.
My name's Nick.
My name's Adam.
I thought you'd forgotten the word hello then.
Why?
I don't know. I was looking at your eyes and it felt like you had no idea what the first word you were supposed to say was.
It's pretty standard. It's always
Yeah,
hello. Pretty
True.
No. My eyes just look vacant occasionally.
Maybe it was that, yeah.
This is another very special bonus episode of Bottom of the Stream.
It is.
Because Nick's on holiday.
I am.
And we recorded them all at the same time, but he's put a hoodie on to make it look like we haven't.
Yeah. That's trying to do continuity.
Exposing you.
Yeah. Well, at least I went to the effort.
You did. I like it. It's good.
It's your house and you've not
I know.
changed.
Literally, my clothes are there.
Yeah.
Oh, well. I like this t-shirt.
That's
Got
fine.
a cherry on.
Yeah, I like it as well. Yeah.
We're here today to talk to you about a recent documentary series that has dropped on Netflix called Mr. McMahon.
Yeah.
It is a look back on the life and career of Vince McMahon.
Maybe it is that.
Well, we'll get into that. The former owner, president, whatever he has been of all these years of the WWE.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, both big wrestling fans over the years. Not so much now.
Yeah, not.
I've got recently, over the last year or so, I've got back into it a lot more than I have been the last few years before this.
Oh, I would say for me it's been a lot of years since I've really watched WWE. But it's topical.
Yes.
Because it is coming to Netflix in January.
It is. In the US, it is just Raw that's coming to. So Raw's their weekly Monday night show. But in the rest of the world, are getting everything WWE related on Netflix next year. It's a 10-year, $5 billion contract.
You are going to see a lot of spandex across your Netflix algorithms in the next few months.
So, as we're the Netflix guys.
Live as well.
Live, yeah. So Raw, SmackDown, NXT, all the PLEs. Yeah. Everything. It's still ambiguous about what's happening with the back catalogue.
Okay.
I'm not sure if all of that's going on there.
It's like 50 years of stuff.
Yeah. But it's all on Peacock currently. It's whether the whole library's going. Nobody's really said that is going on there or not.
Interesting.
But that's an awful lot of content for Netflix to upload if it does.
That feels like too much niche content for Netflix. Because this is a niche thing.
Yeah.
I know Netflix has got lots of niche things on, but that amount of stuff onto Netflix, I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, technically it's all on a server now. All they need to do is
true.
Convert that server to a Netflix server, I guess. But who knows? We'll find out in January. January the 6th is the first episode of Monday Night Raw that's going onto the show, onto Netflix.
And I think the fact that this deal with Netflix is upcoming is one of the reasons that makes this documentary interesting.
Yes.
Because what's the goal of this documentary? Is it to try and prime viewers for this stuff coming over? Is it to try and distance the fact that this evil old man is now disassociated with it and the company's fine, will carry on this?
I think what my first thought on this documentary is what it is being billed as and what it is are not the same thing.
Yeah.
What it's being billed as is the expose of this dirty old man who is gone from the company and isn't there anymore. What it is a really interesting history of wrestling in general.
It's just a linear history of
the WWE.
Yeah.
And therefore the history of the business. So it isn't what it's being billed as, which is the first interesting thing.
It's bookended by the sort of after we filmed this, all these allegations came out, and then there's the last episode.
Yeah.
And we'll get into some of that. But what is interesting that I have found out since this is that when this documentary was perceived and put into action, this was to be a co-production by Netflix and the WWE.
Yeah.
They were on board. Which leads you to think this was to be a kind of fluff piece. Look how great we are. Look how great Vince is. And then that obviously had to change.
All these very serious allegations against Vince McMahon came out.
So just to catch you up, he is currently under federal investigation for sex trafficking. Yeah. With some absolutely horrific allegations. Yeah. That have come out from a former employee. And that's as well as the whole historical load of stuff that he's settled. Basically, he's paid millions of dollars over the years in NDAs.
Potentially hundreds of millions. Yeah. It is.
Women quiet. Yeah. From, What this documentary doesn't point out, which is really interesting, I think it comes up on the screen once when they show a screenshot of the current lawsuit, the front page of the lawsuit, is that the company is also being sued for these allegations because they took place on company property.
Yeah.
There are no, under their watch.
Yeah, this is not just a lawsuit against Vince McMahon. This is a lawsuit against Vince McMahon and the WWE.
There are people in this documentary who are named in that as having known that all this was going on.
Yes.
And that makes this...
There are people in this documentary who have worked alongside Vince McMahon for so long that they can't possibly not know what's been going on. And it's been a secret in the wrestling industry it's not even a secret, an open secret, that Vince is not a good guy for many, many men, for the entire history of wrestling. People know Vince. People have always known that Vince McMahon's not a good guy. It's not like this is a revelation to people who have followed wrestling for as long as me and you have. I don't think I learned much new in this documentary.
No.
That I didn't already know and didn't already know about Vince.
But it's interesting, this documentary does not hide... It is focused on he is under investigation. It never says the company is
because the company will settle out of court.
Yeah, of course it will.
And so will Vince eventually.
And their story will be, we've got rid of him. He's gone. We've put policies in place. It won't happen again.
Vince, we should caveat with that Vince is no longer involved in the WWE at all. He sold all of his shares. He's got no involvement. But that has made him an even richer man than he already was. Yeah. He's made money out of this whole situation. Yeah.
His accuser...
He's also not a young man anymore.
His accuser, or the so far, the one accuser, is saying that she wants her time in court.
Yeah.
It's not just about the money.
And it shouldn't be about the money, but a lot of people have said that about Vince and to Vince over the years.
Yeah, exactly.
And have gone on to settle.
And that makes this whole thing really interesting. So because you've now got all these interviews which were filmed, I think it's like 2021, 2022.
Yeah. The caveat of this documentary is that most of this was filmed before any of these allegations came out.
So you've now got this interesting situation where you've got people who have now distanced themselves from him.
Yeah.
Obviously, we didn't know about it, blah, blah, blah. On film, praising this guy.
Yeah.
And people who we know knew about this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why there are several twitchy backsides, I think it would be fair to
100%.
say.
And there are people who don't come across well in this documentary because they're also bad guys.
Yeah.
Look at Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, as a person, is not a nice person. He's a bad guy. And he comes across really badly. Probably, you could possibly even say more badly than Vince does.
It's quite interesting. One of the earlier episodes where a lot of the wrestlers are talking about, we're trying to put a union together to protect ourselves. And then one of them says, well, Hogan just went and blabbed. And then Vince said, well, you're all out of a job if you form a union. And they ask Hogan, they say, did you do that? And he goes, yeah. Yeah,
I did. Hulk Hogan is all about protecting Hulk Hogan. He always has been.
Yeah. He comes across terrible. He admits lying on camera in previous interviews about the number of times he took steroids.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff. And this documentary ends up just being a history of
wrestling.
Yeah.
And what it is a really good history of wrestling because for the first time, nobody's going to argue with you that Vince McMahon isn't a visionary of wrestling. He is responsible for what wrestling is today. Nobody's going to argue that at all. And so it's really interesting to get that history of wrestling from his point of view and I found it really interesting anyway, of like his opinion on some of this stuff that's gone on in the past.
And he does get challenged.
He does get challenged.
To be fair, on his version of events.
Yeah, because
several times.
A lot of his version of events isn't true.
Yeah.
But it's because he's never really spoken out before about wrestling in general. There's lots of these documentaries, and you could argue there's better documentaries out there about the history of wrestling. But none of them have ever had Vince talking you through situations before.
It's the access to him and his inner circle that this has got going.
As a wrestling fan, that's what made this interesting to me.
But they have all clearly stood it up and agreed their story beforehand.
Yes, 100%.
Literally, one of the first lines in the first episode is Vince says, "I can't tell you the real stories, but I'll try and make this interesting." And then, that is so ominous.
Yeah,
it is.
And he isn't the only one that says it. I think Jimmy Hart says the same thing.
Well, he's on the payroll, isn't it?
Yeah.
He actually says, "I don't know how much I'm allowed to tell you."
Yeah. And I think Tony Atlas says something very similar as well. Wrestling back in the day was a really guarded industry. And a lot of the old school guys have still got that mentality of you're never going to know the true story.
Because that's the old boys still sitting at home going, I might get a phone call one day and Vince is going to give me a job. You know, it's messed up.
The whole industry is messed up. So it starts off telling you about how Vince took over all the territories back in the day.
Took the business from his dad.
Took the business from his dad and made it into this global phenomenon.
Yeah.
So I've always found that side of things really interesting. And then he goes on through the Attitude Era, through some really dark sides of wrestling, like the whole ring boy thing. I don't think that's ever been talked about in documentaries before.
It's something that, again, look, you can go and find podcasts out there in the niche world of wrestling, but it never in like mainstream documentaries. Never gained traction, and that's kind of touched on this in this documentary, that there has been so much scandal and stuff that you could hang people out to dry in over the years in the wrestling world, and because it's just shrugged away by mainstream media.
It's a guarded industry.
It's a hidden open secret. It's a hidden.
Yeah. It's possible that Vince covered up a paedophile ring back in the 80s. That's what this documentary is alleging. Yeah. And it's highly likely that he did.
Like Google Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah, you go. That's briefly mentioned in this documentary as well.
And what allegedly happened to his girlfriend.
There's allegedly Vince is covering up murders at that point, and all this stuff has happened, but there's no regulator to the wrestling industry. So it's such an inner circle that everybody will just back everybody else because of loyalty to Vince and loyalty to the fact that they need a job or needed a job at that point. And then it moves on through the Owen Hart situation.
So some of the lawsuits he was in at the time. He agreed a settlement with an ex female referee.
I'd never heard that story before. I didn't know anything about that situation.
Paid her off with an NDA.
Yeah, that was all new to me. That was probably one of the only things I'd never heard of.
There is a bit in this documentary where he says he denies rape.
Yeah,
says it's consensual, and then he can't help it. He says even if it was rape, the statute of limitations is passed. I was like, this guy, like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is only his money that will. If Vince McMahon never goes to prison, it will be only because of how much money he's got.
How much money he has paid the people to go away.
To go away. Vince McMahon should be in prison. I think that is a fact. And whether he will, whatever happens with this lawsuit and whatever happens with this investigation, that's how it should end up. But it is only the amount of money that he now has, which will stop that. Because, you know what I mean? He's clearly guilty of stuff that deserves to have him in prison for.
I think, though, what is strange about this documentary is that it is a good potted history.
Yeah.
I don't know how interesting it would be to someone just coming in. Is it good? Is it interesting enough for someone who has no interest or in this industry to sit and watch 6 hours of it?
It's currently number 2 in the Netflix TV charts.
Yeah.
So, and that isn't just wrestling fans. It can't be.
I guess
it can't be. I know 2 non-wrestling fans who have watched it and found it really interesting. Yeah. The history of wrestling is a really interesting story. Even if you're not into the in-ring stuff at all, the backstage workings and the history is really fascinating. And this is a really good documentary of that. There are better out there. The WWE themselves have made better. If you watch the Monday Night Wars series on the WWE Network, that's a really good documentary about that sort of situation. But this one, because this one's hit the mainstream.
That's time. That's when you're going to the next level, because that is like 10 hours on what is covered in 25 minutes in this show.
Yeah, absolutely. That's if you want to look further, there are places to look further. If you want to know more about the Montreal Screwjob, that's mentioned quite a lot.
Wrestling with Shadows.
Wrestling with Shadows is a really good documentary. The movie. There's Beyond the Mat from the late 90s that's really good about how wrestlers deal with the sickness of wrestling, is what they call it in that. There's like Dark Side of the Ring is really good. There's like 5 series of Dark Side of the Ring now, and that's all the bad things that have happened. They're like deep dives into the bad things that have happened. Like I think there's a couple of episodes on the whole Chris Benoit situation.
Yeah,
I found that a really interesting part of this documentary was getting Vince's perspective on that. And
so one of my criticisms of this documentary would be when it gets into those major stories like Chris Benoit, Owen Hart, it addresses them, but it stops short of going where I would arguably say a good documentary would.
Yeah. This is where this documentary exposes itself as a co-production.
Yes.
Because
it doesn't go far enough into, like, with the Benoit stuff, the CTE.
Yeah.
It gives it lip service, and then the fact that this guy was brain damaged from 30 years of
the brain
wrestling.
of an 80-year-old man or whatever.
Yeah.
I thought the Steve Austin interview was really interesting on that when he said he didn't believe in CTE.
I always kind of liked Steve Austin.
Oh, I did, yeah. And that kind of exposes him as a...
He basically says he doesn't believe in it.
He doesn't believe in it. The documentary makes him like a moron.
Yeah.
Because CTE is proven facts now.
What I did like about this documentary is some of the mic drops.
Yeah. They did love a mic drop.
They used Dave Meltzer as the fact checker in this documentary, basically.
I've got my own issue with that, but yes.
But they did. That's what his role was in this, and that's how he was edited. So, like, they're talking about inflating attendances.
Yeah.
And they're all going, 93,000 at this show, 93,000. And then Meltzer just goes, yeah, it was 75,000.
Yeah. He actually says, I think they've said 93,000 for so long that they believe it themselves now.
He is, like, the world's sort of foremost wrestling journalist.
Yeah. Journalist, in very inverted commas. I have my own issues with. You could make a documentary on Dave Meltzer. I've lost track of what I was saying now.
Sorry.
I don't know where I was going. I thought what I did think was really good was that they told you about all these lawsuits during the episodes, and then at the end of the episode, it'd be like, Vince settled out of court for this one. Vince settled out of court for this one. There's no point does he ever... I don't think he's ever been to court on any of these lawsuits. I think he's always just paid off people who have accused him of stuff.
He had to go for the steroid trial in the
He did go through
90s,
the steroid trial.
Which, because one of their doctors
kind of different.
Was issuing steroids to all them.
And even then, Hogan was making out that he was going to come out and say all this stuff, and he lied to everybody then as well, and how he came in. He still backed it, even though he wasn't working for Vince at that point. He still came in and backed Vince's opinion.
Yeah.
But you're right. It does. It isn't the expose that it's being portrayed as.
Yeah.
I do think at some point in the future we'll probably get that.
The one that always gets me is like the Owen Hart one. Yeah. I think I mentioned this to you off camera. So Owen Hart in the 1999,
May the 23rd, 1999.
Yeah, he fell to his death from the ceiling of an arena. He was supposed to be lowered down on a harness to make his entrance. It failed. Fell to his death, and there's this whole thing. Vince does this whole thing of the show went on. I'd make the same decision. And I've got no regrets. It was an awful situation, and this is what I mean by this documentary. Like, it goes so far, but then it doesn't do the actual It doesn't go to. It's not an investigative documentary.
It's not.
There's so much there that is weird about that whole situation. It's a terrible situation. But the fact that show was allowed to go on, and like the Kansas City police didn't just shut the whole thing
Where
down.
are the police in that situation? Yeah. Because
like this is potentially a crime scene.
Yeah.
You know, an instance happened. Everyone out, shut it down.
Yeah.
That they were allowed to do another 2 hours of the show.
What they did, in Bret Hart's words, they scraped him off the ring and carried on wrestling on it. And I remember at the time being mind-boggled then about how that show carried on.
Yeah.
And it's still to
that
this
shouldn't
day,
have been Vince McMahon's decision.
No, it shouldn't at all.
I
Even the owners of the arena should be making that call, surely, if not the police.
If the police come in and say, no, shut it down. It's like... And that's why and it does the same with the Benoit stuff. It doesn't
go deep enough.
Yeah.
Because because at the time there was no need to. It was pitched as a WWE. Yeah. It was supposed to be a.
And then they are trying to retrofit this with what they've got, and that's why it's kind of sometimes it's neither here nor there.
I think maybe in the future, when all's said and done, when the lawsuits are all settled, or Vince is in prison or somewhere else, you may get that. You may get this expose documentary, but that isn't what this is. Even though that's what it's being sold as.
If you watch the trailer, that's what this is sold as.
And the poster.
Yeah.
It isn't that. What it is a pretty good history of wrestling. Yeah. It's as simple as that. That's what this documentary is. But there are better examples out there.
But what I guess the objective is simply viewing hours for Netflix. Yeah. But I don't think anyone's going to watch this and then go, oh, definitely going to tune into the... It's not an advert for the product.
It isn't an advert for the product. What I do find really interesting is that wrestling history stops the minute Chris Benoit's crime happens. There is no more wrestling history. That was 20 years ago.
Oh yeah. Well, this documentary then goes into always from his relationship, Vince's relationship with his
Shane
kids
and with Stephanie. But there aren't many documentaries exposing the wrestling set in the last 20 years. The business has cleaned up. It might not be as clean as it claims to be now, but it has cleaned up a lot. And there is no controversies that go on backstage anymore that you hear of anyway. But wrestling history in any one of these documentaries, even Dark Side of the Ring, has never touched on anything later than the Chris Benoit incident, I don't think.
Yeah, but the number of like young deaths has slowed to stopped, hasn't it? It's it's late 90s, early 2000s. You were getting
all the time.
Several times a year.
Horrible.
Yeah. They even list it at one point in this documentary. Yeah. X person, Y person, Z person died age, 38, 40.
Yeah, if you're a wrestler and you survived to 40, you'd done well in those days. And that has gone away. That has all gone away now. And that's because of how the good job they did do with the CTE stuff and the drug testing stuff.
And the schedules.
And the schedule's a lot lighter now than it was. And it's a much healthier, better, less toxic industry to be in now. And that isn't because Vince has gone, because Vince has only been gone a year.
Yeah.
And for 20 years now, wrestling's been cleaning up its act. But I find it really interesting that nothing happens post the Benoit death.
The other interesting thing about this is that at no point, even on the credits that Netflix have had, there's nothing that says coming in January you can watch the WWE.
I don't think it's even billed as a Netflix original. It's just it's on there. But the fact is, since Vince has left, the wrestling industry has grown magnitudes. WWE is better product than it's been in 25, 30 years.
I just wonder how much is Netflix's hands forced that they've had to talk to the documentary guys and say, look, God, we need something. You've got all this footage, and the documentary crew is like, well, look, this has completely changed the story that we've started, and look what's happening.
Yeah.
And you've ended up with this kind of a bit of a mishmash of, it's the first 10 minutes of the first episode and the last half an hour of the last episode. That's the coverage of the current lawsuits and federal investigation.
Yeah.
So it does have that bookend on, but the rest of it is just that this is the program that we were making all that.
To start with. We've just got to... Now we know that our main character is a bad guy. We've got to spin it.
There's literally 2 interviews, isn't there, in the last episode, which they say were post all this stuff coming out. One's a WWE official, and they bring Dave Meltzer back as well, to sort of cover some of the ongoing cases. So it ends up being this weird final product.
Yeah, it does.
That's half love letter, half expose. Well,
it's one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
Some people come off all right in it. Shane McMahon, I thought, came off really well.
Yeah, he did.
I thought his
the
whole story about his relationship with his father was really interesting.
I can't remember who it is. Someone says at one point he's nice. He's
the
too
nice McMahon, I think they describe him as.
And that's why he kind of walked away when he wanted to walk away.
Yeah.
Some people come across pretty horribly.
Yeah. Look at Hulk Hogan. Look at Bruce Pritchard.
Yeah.
Steve Austin. They don't come out well in it.
Yeah.
But the fact that Bruce Pritchard still got a job is mind-boggling.
Yeah. The Undertaker's on there. Just literally every sentence is like how great Vince is.
Yeah.
Because he is like his most loyal employee, and it's like that now does not reflect well on you.
It doesn't.
It's like you have not worked there, mate, for 40 years without knowing what's
you know Vince is a bad guy, but you also know that he's made you an awful lot of money and made you a worldwide star.
Yeah.
So you have to, I guess, in your own head, you have to kind of weigh up. I imagine now that all this has come out, whether some of those people would even bother being interviewed, because a refusal to be a part of a documentary is as good as you're going to get, I think, nowadays.
That's why Bruce Pritchard is so angry when he is brought back. He was obviously the offered up official post the allegations.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there knowing that he's said all this stuff in praise of this guy.
Yeah.
And he was there through the 80s, 90s.
He's always been there.
Yeah.
He's still there now. He's still there to this day. He still sits in Gorilla with Triple H, and he's still there.
Yeah.
He feels like he's the last man standing of that McMahon era. That whole boys club that McMahon surrounded himself with. It feels like Pritchard's the last man standing.
Yeah. And
he becomes he is like the sacrificial lamb in that documentary.
There's like I said,
he's also got a really good brain for wrestling.
There's several people in this who know where the skeletons are.
Yeah.
And it'll come out in the wash.
It'll all come out in the wash. It will. It's just going to be an interesting wash to view.
Yeah.
If it ever even comes to court, which it probably won't.
Yeah, and then you got this whole thing of, obviously, it's going to be all over Netflix in January. And I think this company is only going to get bigger and richer because I think my perception is that Americans don't realise how... So for years and years, this stuff's been on Sky Sports, BT Sports overhead, like real niche channels.
Yeah.
And across the rest of the world, putting this product on Netflix is
huge for the WWE.
In terms of numbers of viewers, it could be stratospheric.
Yeah. Even for me, I mean, I'll openly admit I don't have any way of watching their product currently. I have to pirate it or stream it or whatever. To be able to just click it onto Netflix and it's there, that's game changing for a wrestling fan. Because if you don't pay for like Sky Sports, I don't even know what Raw's on these days. Sky Sports, BT Sports, one of them. If you don't pay for those channels, you can't watch that product.
Yeah.
With Netflix, people are already there. The audience is there waiting, and they will watch it. The viewing figures will be astronomical for things like Raw and SmackDown every week. And then you're also going to get the casual fan that will just flick it on. The lapsed fans will come back.
Yeah.
If it's there, you just I wonder what's going on in that. The viewing figures will be crazy. It's the best thing that could have possibly happened to the WWE. That Netflix
in terms of the corporate, the money, it's
huge.
It could be a game changer.
Yeah, I think it could be.
So all these terrible people will have their even more money in their pockets.
Yeah. I think the business is a lot cleaner than it was, and the majority of them have gone.
Yeah. Well, yes. All you would say is, there are, like we said, there are executives there who were there all through this,
and are still there now,
and
aren't going anywhere.
That sort of stuff comes out in the wash.
Yeah.
The company enabled all this stuff to happen over many years.
Yeah.
And it is not as simple as saying that guy's gone, it's all sorted.
Yeah. It shouldn't be that simple.
Yeah.
It may transpire that it is that simple, but it shouldn't be that simple.
What are the policies? What have they done?
Yeah.
They will need to show these are our safeguarding policies. This is what's changed. It can't be, it's a public company now. You can't be a behind the closed doors. Secret society type thing, which has always been.
No, it's an interesting time.
Yeah,
it really is.
Okay,
cool. Well, I think we've done a lot more than we thought we would on that. So go and watch it. Honestly, even if you're not a wrestling fan, it's a really interesting documentary.
It is interesting.
Just check it out. It's on there. I think a lot of people. It's only behind Monsters in the chart.
Okay,
so
interesting.
I think a lot of people are checking it out.
What this does have going for it is because it was that co-production. All those documentaries you talked about earlier are great, but this has got all the footage.
Yeah.
So Dark Side of the Ring is great, but they have to reconstruct.
Yeah.
Stuff.
There's no actual footage in Dark Side.
This is whatever they talk about in this documentary. They have then pulled from the footage of that because this is done with the cooperation of the company, so it's got all that archive footage.
Yeah.
That's what this does have going for it.
Yes.
I had never seen before so when they get into how they screwed over Bret Hart, they then reference that had happened before in the 80s with Wendy Richter, and I'd never seen that footage.
I'd never seen that. I knew it happened, but I'd never seen that footage before either, and that was quite interesting.
Yeah. What you don't get any of, and I presume this was in there. No, we're not letting you have that. Which I think is a lot of people were hoping for, is the actual sitting in meetings talking about plotting storylines that we still don't see any of that.
You're never going to get any of that. That's something that will never happen.
Yeah. So
cool. Well,
okay,
cool. Yeah, it's an interesting documentary. Go and check it out. Thank you for watching us waffle about it for the last half an hour.
Sure.
Our regular show will be around and about. Check it out. It comes out every Monday on YouTube and all your podcasting apps. And then our bottom of the stream movie review show comes out every Thursday on every podcasting app you can think of.
It does.
And it'll be there. Go and check us out.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Cheers.
Bye.